and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It depends on when you are going to watch this episode of EBI Talks. Today, we are very pleased to have Dr. Mark Fritz with us. I'm quite confident that this interview and this episode of EBI Talks will be very beneficial, especially for the youth who usually extract a lot of information and experiences from such webinars. Good morning, Dr. Mark.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here today.
It's our pleasure. Let me start with the very usual introductory question, which is, who is Mark Fitz?
Who is Mark Fitz? Well, I'm an American, married to a Japanese, living in London. I spent about over 30 years living around the world and settled in London from my home. And after a 25-year corporate career, now I'm a professor, speaker, mentor, all on leadership, and particularly the power of ownership and being able to successfully lead anyone from anywhere. And that's really a powerful thing in today's world where everybody is home working and working virtually and online all the time these days.
Great. Okay, let us move to our next question, which is leadership, and it is specifically agile leadership. What does agile leadership mean, and why does it matter, especially in times of uncertainty?
Yeah, that's a great question because, you know, agile leadership, everybody has a different sort of way they look at it, you know, what it is and so forth. But it's really about creating the right context for self-organization or for people to be able to do more on their own, you know, to work with each other, collaborate with each other, give feedback with each other, and really, how would you say, work together faster. I think in times of uncertainty, it requires everybody to be much more adaptable and to take more responsibility because we have to adapt and change quicker. And you just can't be told what to do. And so Agile is very powerful in this type of environment to really help people, you know, to make faster decisions. But you have to really enable the people. You have to have the right people who want to take responsibility and you give them, you know, kind of a context or a freedom. And, you know, I always heard one time from one really good leadership speaker, he said this: leaders are the context providers. We provide the context by which our teams work together. And I think Agile is very, very powerful in an environment of uncertainty where you really have to adapt, make changes, take feedback on, and really move forward faster.
Great. Usually people put much focus and emphasis on leaders, while in many cases, you know, followers and followership is somehow disregarded. Let me ask you about followers and about followership. Effective followers can always shape productive leadership behavior, just as, you know, effective leadership. From your point of view, how driving change and convincing people to willingly and effectively follow leaders' direction, how can we do that?
Yeah, it's so extremely important because you want people to be working together. And, you know, for leaders, it's about creating a very strong direction and getting people's involvement in defining that direction as you can. But, you know, people need to feel that something is theirs. If they're just doing it for you, that's one thing. But if they're part of it, they feel part of it is theirs, they're doing it for themselves as well. And I think what's really important is for leaders to set a very good example. And then you get people following much stronger. I'll tell you a quick funny story, but I used to live in Japan. And I was only there for 2 weeks. The first 2 weeks I was there, and a person would come through selling, you know, soft drinks, tea, coffee, and everything. And she brought a young girl with her, and I didn't know, and it was her daughter. I didn't know daughter in Japanese. She didn't know daughter in English. She said, "This is my copy." You know, your followers, they'll copy you. So you want to be very, very consistent in the direction, and you want to be having high integrity in your behaviors, and people will follow you much more closely.
Okay, the follow-up question. Agile leaders are always open to the influence and ideas of others, and regardless of their status or position. In this context, the notion of psychological safety at work is gaining a lot of momentum these days. Yes. And all employees need to feel comfortable while expressing their opinions and ideas without fear of negative judgment or consequences. How can organizations and leaders create a psychological safe environment at work?
Yeah, that's a good one, because, you know, it's so important for your people to be very open and speak out when they have ideas or if they see problems and so forth. And, you know, psychological safety is willing to do that. But here's an interesting one, is that you need to grow people's ability to be adaptable. If you think about it, we don't grow when we're totally comfortable. We grow when we're uncomfortable. And sometimes it will be uncomfortable for us to bring up an issue that we really should bring up well too. So I think part of it is creating an environment of trust where people are willing to say what they're thinking. But part of it is really helping people to be more adaptable. And a good goal is helping people to be comfortable being slightly uncomfortable sometimes, because they need to be open to share some things. And I think one of the best things in teams is that you have really people that are willing to disagree with each other. Because if they're always happy and no one's disagreeing with each other, probably you have one of two problems. Either you have low trust in the team and people don't trust each other to say what they're thinking, or everybody's thinking alike and probably you hired everybody who's exactly the same. So I think it's so important to have our people feel, you know, it's comfortable being a little bit uncomfortable too. And I think that's very, very important. And I think one of the most important sort of skills or attributes or behaviors we need to encourage in our people now is to be adaptable and to be open to people with different opinions, to be open to different ways, to not always think my way is the best and I have the right answer. So I think it's willing to really listen and be adaptable.
Actually, your comment triggered another question to Mark, which is how can leaders strike balance between popularity and having their followers uncomfortable? Because usually this is a contradiction that is always leaders tend to satisfy one of those two, you know, polar sides of the scale. It's either to make them comfortable so that I become popular, and or I can make them uncomfortable. Meanwhile, they will not like me doing so, and my popularity will go down. How can we strike a balance? Because you know, this is quite a struggling ideas.
Yeah, boy, you hit the nail on the head here. It's so important. You think about it. Leadership is not a process. There's an art to leadership, right? And leadership is like a painting. You know, if you were to lose a key person in your team, you wouldn't recreate the painting the exact same way. You'd have to compensate with different people and so forth. And I think one of the true arts of leadership is understanding when you can stretch people out of their comfort zone and when you can't. And if you think about it, if you hire the right people always want to use their potential. And your potential is always outside your comfort zone. So what I found is that you can get people to stretch if they realize they're using their potential and they're growing. And then they're willing to stretch. When people don't want to use their potential and don't want to grow at all, and if they want to stay comfortable, their value to your organization is the same 5 years from now it is today because they haven't grown. So I think one of the most underutilized conversations in business is talking about someone's potential. Because when they're really going after their potential, they're going to be willing to be uncomfortable and they're going to have to be comfortable at doing that.
That's exactly what I've been telling my students in leadership classes, as well as my team, that you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable while trying to build yourself as a leader.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You know, I'll tell you a quick one I found from a consultant many years ago. I thought it was very insightful. He said, my goal in life is to constantly meet people who disturb my view of the world. They're always going to force me to think differently or to different, because I'm always going to be, you know, being more open to other things. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, moving to the following question. Okay. Giving employees the power to make decisions and to own their jobs,
right,
and to own their achievement is the main message you are always trying to deliver to your audience. We all know that people work better when they are energized, enabled, and engaged. From your point of view, how can leaders build ownership and improve engagement among the team members?
Yeah, that's the main theme, and that's what started me on teaching and focusing on this thing, because I used to lead people at a distance. At a distance, I can't see what they do. I can only manage what they achieve. In other cultures, I can't tell people exactly what to do sometimes, because business gets done differently. So I really want people to own the achievement, not just the activity. And it's around really asking about the how versus telling the how. And so when I found, if you ask your people about what options do you think we have, you get to see if you can really trust them, because they show you the level of depth of their thinking and knowledge and so forth. So I found that, you know, the leaders, how would you say, fuel or power comes from the quality of their questions. And if you ask questions at the right way, your people feel that the solution is theirs and not yours. Because if you're telling them what to do, you're saving them from thinking. And if you're saving them from thinking, you're saving them from growing. And so I found that the best leaders who get ownership probably ask the best questions. I think that's the key.
Asking the right questions. Okay. Follow question. How do you assess micromanagers and micromanagement? Is it unavoidable to have negative leadership behavior, or some micromanagers can have a good impact on their teams and organizations?
Yeah, there was always that case about, is micromanagement good or bad, and everything. It's always in the right context. But here's what I found. When you micromanage people, you're creating a speed limit for your organization. Because micromanagement comes with a speed limit. You're operating to your head speed and capacity to tell everybody what to do. Now, if you don't have the right people in the team, and they really need a lot of guidance, you're going to have to micromanage to help them. But if they don't need the guidance and you're still micromanaging, you're preventing them from growing. And what I found is there's two reasons why people micromanage often. Is one of the feeling of control, right? I need to get involved and tell people what to do to be in control, that everything is being done correctly. So they do it for control. But a surprising one is another one. Is sometimes micromanagers micromanage because they like doing it. You know, leadership is not easy. So I want to have some fun. So I'll get involved and tell people what to do, because I really love this part of my job. So I found, and this is an interesting one, I often did a session with executives on letting go. And I asked all the executives to write on the flip charts all the reasons why they micromanage and they don't let go. And always, at least 80% of the reasons had nothing to do with their team. It had to do with their own insecurities or their own behaviors, why they micromanage. Okay. So, you know, what I found with micromanagement is that if you don't have the right people, you have to get involved and make sure it works. But if you're a very good leader and you're hiring the right people and you're asking the right questions, they can find the answers on their own. Your job is to provide a strong direction, and your job is to really set the tone for the culture that will get people to work together. So, you know, micromanagement generally is a bad thing. And because if you're micromanaging an organization, more of the decision making is just within you, and you're not allowing the decisions being made closer to the work where the organization will run faster. So just for people that are micromanaging, I think the first thing to do is take a look at yourself. Are you the reason you're micromanaging, or is it your team that's driving you that way? And so, you know, as leaders, you know, we can choose, we get to choose kind of how we want to lead, but it's not all our choice. Now, in other words, we have to lead our people based on the people we have. So some people might need stronger direction. Some people don't need as much direction. So our people determine the leader we need to be to get the best from them. And I think that's really important too.
Exactly. Okay. Question is how to achieve a high performance team work environment. How to balance between promoting healthy competition among the team members and assuring an effective collaboration to achieve mutual objectives.
You know, I've never seen a successful organization and a very, very high performing team that didn't have some element of internal competition. Okay. Because internal competition creates energy, but I don't really think about it as internal competition. I think it more of making sure we're holding people accountable and we're celebrating success. And I think the biggest thing is we need to make more of people's, commitments visible, right? So if your commitment is visible to others in the team and you need to do this, say by next Wednesday, and you don't do it, you will look bad in front of your team members. It's kind of like peer pressure. And I found that the most successful teams have many more things visible. It's not just connection between the leader and the team member, but they make more of everybody's commitments visible. So you have to deliver, or your reputation takes a risk with the rest of the team. And also think about it this way. If your work is much more visible and you do a fantastic job, you're going to feel tremendous pride. And you're going to feel pride because more and more people know how you did a good job. So yeah, I'll give you an interesting one from my own career. When in my own career, I said, you know, what do I want to create in my organization? What's the results I want to drive? The second thing I'm thinking about are who are the key people that are going to help me deliver that, and I have to enable to deliver it. The third thing I was always thinking is what can I make visible to encourage the right ownership, accountability, and peer pressure, and what can I make visible for my team to feel pride in what they're achieving and what they're accomplishing. So I think those are the two things. And what I found, and if you think about it, think back into the militaries in all the countries around the world. The Marines have a very powerful culture of high performance and accountability because they do an after-action review and they're so accountable to each other is that if we don't do our job individually, our fellow Marine might die on some mission and so forth. And I heard one Marine say he could describe the culture of the Marines as one word, love. You know, we love each other that way. So if you really want high performance, you need people keeping their commitments, and holding people accountable is one of those, but you also need to make things visible in ways that they can feel pride when they achieve it. And, you know, celebrate both the small and big wins, because when you celebrate things, you're kind of creating a positive addiction to progress. And that's what a high performance team really wants to feel all the time. We are making progress.
This is very inspiring. Okay, question. Leading organizations fight for top talent. How can an organization develop an effective employer brand to attract better and more qualified applicants and to engage and retain the talent inside the organization?
Yeah, you know, is it interesting one on this one related what I heard from Tony Hsieh, who just died recently. He was the CEO of Zappos. You know, he said employees are not your most important asset. He said the employee pipeline is the most important asset, that you have someone who could replace as people grow. And what I said earlier, I think is very important. The most underutilized discussion in business is potential. When you discuss people's potential and they're able to start using it all the time, they're highly motivated and they're growing and they're able to see opportunities for their future. That creates a brand for your company that if I go to that company or that organization, I'm going to be growing. And the best people always will leave an organization when they stop growing because they need another opportunity to grow faster. And one time when I went into a job, and I always used to ask my people this question: when did your last boss talk to you about your potential? And one of my managers in one of the countries said, I think you're asking the wrong question. Has ever a boss talked to me about my potential? You know, but it's so important to help that because, you know, people that are growing feel great about themselves and they feel great about the organization. People that are not growing will always look to blame others and so forth. So I think one of the most underutilized discussions is talking about people's potential.
Great. Okay. From your point of view, how to reduce the harmful effects of work overload and tight deadlines on creative behaviors? I think this is a very popular question.
Yeah, well, with all the things, when you're going through change, you're always going to have to put in some extra hours at this time. I think what's so important, what gives the biggest frustration with the extra hours, is if leaders constantly changing priorities or changing what's important today, important tomorrow, and so forth. Because when you report to a leader who's always changing their priorities and is not consistent, it raises a question mark in people's heads. So, you know, they're stopping and starting and so forth. So I think what I found is when you have people that have extra things to do, be very, very clear on what the direction is, what's most important, so they know what they're focusing on in the right way and why this is important and how people's contribution will help in achieving what we need to achieve in this very short time. But I found in the business or in just, you know, personal creativity, and if you want people to be really creative and find better ways and be more productive, they need a clear target. So it's so important for us as leaders to be very, very clear. And, you know, I think in almost any language, the most important word in a language is clarity. Because think about it. When something isn't clear in the organization, is something good happening or something bad happening? It's usually bad. So I think for leadership, especially in times of high pressure, to be clear and to be consistent is going to enable your people to handle this in much better ways. And also, I think the other thing is don't be concerned so much about the activity. Be concerned about what they're achieving and give your people some flexibility on how they're going to do it. So, you know, there's so much pressure now with home working. You know, some managers are saying, hey, I need some tools so I can measure what they're doing all day. And it's not measure what they're doing, you're measuring what they're achieving. So sometimes they might have to help and do with schoolwork during the day, and they might not get finished what you want until maybe 8 or 9 at night after the kids are put to bed. So you have to be a little bit more flexibility and not manage your team based on activity, but manage your team based on the achievement and give them a little bit of flexibility about how they're going to do that throughout their day. I think that's extremely important during these times, especially with people working virtually and working from home.
Great. I'll try to build on what you just said about, performance management and whether people are assessed for their performance or for their achievements. We hear a new notion these days that, performance management is no longer preferable, and some organizations started to move away from this. How can you assess this? Because, this will, knock down most of the, HR management systems in many organizations that is fully built on performance management ratings.
Yeah, well, performance, you need to measure performance in some way, right? What is good? Good is only good by comparison, right? It's comparing to budget last year, whatever, and you need performance metrics. And if you think about KPIs and so forth, or if you're doing that, probably somewhere between 3 and 7 is the KPIs you have. I went into one organization and I said, how many KPIs do you have? And they said, we have 150. Well, they aren't very key if they're 150. I think what's important is you always have to measure performance, but what are you measuring? A lot of times people say the balanced scorecard or other things. But, basically what you measure, people focus on. And I think it's so important for us as leaders to measure things that drive both the right behaviors in our organization, but also the achievements in the direction where we want to go, right? So, in other words, I think the biggest thing that your metrics should drive is strong direction and strong pace or progress. Those are the two things that the metrics should drive. And you have to be very, very careful about creating the metrics, because if you ask your people to give you metrics, they will always give you metrics that they can feel comfortable to hit or comfortable for them to deliver, yes, but that might not be delivering the future fast enough. It's always a strong direction and pace that delivers the future faster. And so I found that your most important discussion as a leader are those metrics that support creating the future. Because if you don't have a strong hand in creating those metrics and really driving them, you're going to get metrics which preserve the present. And if it preserves the present, it's really putting you into the past, because not changing is sending you backwards. So I think the most important discussion as a leader is, what are you going to measure? And I was struck by 3 questions I heard from a general who managed his organization. And it kind of relates to what we were talking about now during the session. He ran his organization with 3 questions. First question, what's the plan? What are we going to deliver and by when? Second question, who's in charge? Someone has to be responsible. Third question, compared to what? What are you comparing good to? Are you comparing good to last year? Are you comparing good to a benchmark? Are you comparing good to outside another organization? So I think as a leader, the most important discussion is, what is good? What are you comparing good to? Because if you set the bar too low for good, you're going to get mediocre performance. If you set the bar a little bit higher, which requires people to stretch a little bit, you will get a little bit better performance too. Okay. So, but I think, the discussions around KPI is very important, because if you know very strongly the 3 to 5 to 7 KPIs that will measure to 90% the effectiveness of your organization, then you know which metrics contribute to that, and you know where to look if something is wrong. So being very clear on those KPIs helps you run your whole business, because you know where to look if one of those metrics is wrong. So I think overall, I'd say a very important discussion for leadership is really making very, very clear what good is.
Very good. Okay, I went through some of the literature knowledge provided by you, and I heard that you talked a lot about the mindful leadership. What is that?
Mindful leadership. NIFO leadership. NIFO
Yes.
leadership. Yeah, this is one of the most important leadership behaviors if you want people to take ownership. Nose in, fingers out, right? Your nose is in. You're involved in the organization. You're not surprised by something you should have known. But your fingers aren't in. You're not telling your people what to do all the time. Because if you tell your people what to do, they're going to want the easy way out and just come to you for the easy answer the next time. So I think one of the best reflection questions at the end of each week is ask yourself, did I live NIFO? Did I lead NIFO? Was I surprised by something because my nose wasn't in? Am I having to give the answer too often because I'm saving my people from thinking by giving that answer? So, nose in, it's your questions. The better questions you ask, because the right questions do two things. They get your people thinking, and you get to understand if you can trust your people. Now, if you have to give the answer, you should be using stories and examples, because stories and examples do not psychologically directly tell people what to do, but they get the idea of what to do. And stories and examples are powerful because they're memorable and they can relate it. And think of it another way. If I tell you a story or an example, often your brain will go to a similar experience in your own life, and now it becomes highly relevant. So stories and examples is a fast track to your people's brain. And so it's interesting to listen to, but it's also highly relevant because it's going to trigger something similar to in your own experiences. So I found that the twins of very successful leaders are two things: asking good questions and sharing powerful stories and examples. And powerful stories and examples are extremely important when you're setting a vision, because people need to see themselves within that vision. And the only way they do that is really through stories and examples that they can engage with. And it's something similar to their own. So I always say to people, in fact, I went back to customers 10 years ago. I said, what do you remember from my time with you? And they remember two things: taking an outcome focus to things versus activities. And second one, leading NIFO, nose in, fingers out. You know, during the lockdown in April, I worked with a Spanish resort. So the leadership team of a Spanish resort. And then they went out of lockdown and they were operating, you know, with conditions because of the virus and everything. But one of his team members was telling his people what to do too often. And all the boss said to him was one word: NIFO. And he knew exactly what he was doing wrong and how he needed to change. He only said one thing: NIFO.
It became a keyword now.
It became a keyword for that. And you also see NIFO is very important for board of directors, right? The board of directors should be nose in, fingers out. They should be telling the CEO what to do, but their nose should be what? In. Yeah.
This is very insightful. You know, with all the lockdown, the working remotely, learning remotely, managing teams remotely, what would you advise leaders to do when it comes to distance management?
Number one, you have to run productive meetings if you're going to lead at a distance. Okay. You know, think about it. If you're on a phone call and you had a unproductive meeting, you leave the meeting feeling this was a waste of time, and you're demotivated and everything. And when we were back in the offices and we attended a poorly run meeting, we went back and told the whole office this was terrible. So I found that, you know, successfully leading at a distance, we have to run very good meetings. And you have to eliminate this phrase from your organization. Often when people create meetings, they say, we need a meeting to discuss something. Discussion is an activity. It's not an outcome. All your meetings should have an outcome. And there's only 3 outcomes for meetings in business. You need an agreed decision, you need an agreed action, or you need alignment. because meetings are for progress. And if you can make progress without a meeting, you don't need a meeting. So I found the most important thing when you're virtual is actually there's three things I used to say. Manage people by outcomes, run very, very successful meetings, and encourage people to talk to each other real time. So if they have a problem, they call each other up, they message, but they don't send an email. Because then you get the email tag and it takes long. So I think, take an outcome focus, run very outcome focused meetings, very successful meetings that way, and also encourage your people to deal with problems real time versus sending emails back and forth. Those are the three I found particularly handling virtual. And my first virtual organization that I led was back in 2001.
Wow.
And I had people everywhere. And actually, we asked people in the organization to recommend how should we communicate well with each other. And one of those was having outcome-focused meetings. And the other one was doing something very simple, like putting in the subject line if you needed action by someone. So they put action dash topic, and then you knew you needed to take action. So I think if you get your people, especially your best people, to say this is the way we need to work, they become the role models for the others. And it's very, very powerful. And the fastest way to change any organization is through role models, because people copy what works. And that's very, very powerful.
Okay, we have two questions left. First one is, from your point of view, what would be the skills and competences of the future? With this whole digital disruption taking place and agility, coping with change, what would you think the most 5 or 4 must-have skills for the future?
I think everything comes down first to personal responsibility. I mean, when you're working virtual or you're working in a more complex environment, you have to take more personal responsibility. So you can't always be looking for someone to tell you what to do. But here's what I found is that, people are successful because of their strengths, and their strengths drive them to be successful. It's the weaknesses that only slow it. And I think the number one skill for the future is you always have to work on your ability to be adaptable and your influencing skills, because you're going to have to work with more and more different types of people. We're not just going to work with people in our neighborhood anymore. We're working with people across the world. So we need to be adaptable, and we need to have very good influencing skills, that we are able to collaborate with the people well, and we'll be able to influence people in terms of, where we'd like to go in direction, or gain collaboration, or gain people's trust or motivation. And I think one of the most important things I found in terms of chasing your potential, if you're chasing your potential, you means you're going to have to do work with other people, because if you're only doing it yourself, you're limited what you can achieve with your own 24 hours. The minute you have to work with other people, you need good influencing skills to drive collaboration. So I think we're so much more collaborative in our work these days. We need to constantly be growing people's influencing skills so that they can adapt quicker, collaborate quicker, influence faster, and to move things forward faster too. So, I mean, if I would say 2 things, one is know yourself well and be personally responsible for your own behaviors. Second one is constantly develop your influencing skills.
Okay. Last question. It's quite a personal question. Okay. We need to know a little bit about Mark Fritz that has nothing to do with business.
A little bit about me?
That has nothing to do with business. For instance, if you have one free day and you have done all the gradings of the exams and all the lectures and everything, and you have one free day, what would you do?
Well, I like, exploring places with my wife when I travel and everything. The thing I don't have the time to do that I'd like to do more of, and now that I'm not traveling as much, it could be possible in the future, is play golf. I actually only went to university to play golf initially because I was recruited to play golf in a university. And then I woke up and I knew I had to get better, education and things like that. But I found also when I was through my career, playing golf helped me to really understand people, because I can have an executive for 5 hours on the golf course and I can really understand their behavior by how they behave on the golf course. So it was very insightful for me too. And in fact, when I was in my teens, I was playing with people much, much older than me all the time. And it helped my own growth, I thought, by putting myself around people that were bigger than I am. And so I think for me, as much as I can, that's I'd like to do more of when I have the time.
Okay, talking about traveling, have you visited Egypt?
I actually lived in Egypt for 9 months back in 83, 84. I took the operations of an Egyptian subsidiary from manual to computers.
Very good.
And I computerized the whole operation. And in fact, that's what I did early in my career. I used to put in enterprise systems. Big bang. We change everything from for you, Thursday to Sunday. And I did it in Egypt, I did it in Netherlands, and I did it in Japan. So, but I really enjoyed my time, and my lunch was often shawarma, and I really enjoyed my time there, and I wish I was back a few times since then, but it was a real pleasure.
In fact, the pleasure is all ours, Dr. Mark. I wish that this pandemic thing goes away, and we hopefully see you soon in Egypt without face masks. At the end of this interview, I would like to thank you very much. It was really insightful, informative, and educating experience. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you all EBI community for being with us today. Looking forward to meeting you in the next episode of EBI Talks. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much.